Hello and welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and our ministries here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. We do so believing that God is doing wonderful things through us. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, pleased to be your host on the program today. And with us is Pastor Larry Camberg. Pastor Camberg has served as a pastor in our synod for a number of years and now is currently serving as our interim assistant to the bishop. Pastor Camberg, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Tony. It was very nice for you to invite me to be here.
Thank you. And tell us a little bit about, first of all, your journey to this point here. Now, did you begin serving here in this area here? Is this your home territory here in Southwestern Pennsylvania?
I've been 49 years a pastor. Started out with my first call at Grace Rochester down in the Beaver Valley, and have served in small and large congregations over the years. And since I retired 7 years ago, I've had 8 different interims that I'm involved with, including the current one as interim assistant to the bishop. You are aware that Pastor Kessinger has now accepted a call down in Virginia, McLean, Virginia, and I'm temporarily taking most of her job responsibility over to help the Bishop Cusserow accomplish what needs to be done to make this synod continue to be serving.
Well, first of all, thank you and many blessings on all these years of service that you have had. And is this home territory for you here in Southwestern Pennsylvania? You grew up here?
My home congregation was at St. John's in Swissvale, which is, suburban Pittsburgh, out on the other side of the Squirrel Hill tunnels from downtown. Grew up there. Pastor Frederick Sternett was my pastor when I was a little boy, and I had him until I was a teenager, and then Pastor Kenneth Munster was my pastor in the congregation, and that's when I decided to go into the ministry. One of the interesting things is my first visit with the synod was when it was on the north side at Mount Zion Church. That's where I went to meet with Dr. Himmelman and Pastor Nisley to be certified as a candidate for the ministry, and that's a long time ago. And that's before the building was out here, and we had the North Hills was the place where the synod was located.
Our office is here now on Perry Highway in McCandless.
Yes.
And you've seen quite a few changes, not only from those early days whenever you first became a pastor, having to meet with the examining committee,
right,
but also a previous time spent as a part of the bishop's staff during your ministry. Can you say some things about that?
Well, in 1982 through 1987, that was in the ending years of the old West Virginia Synod of the LCA. I served as assistant to Bishop May, and probably some of your viewers would remember some initials from that era. It was DMS, and that was one of the most influential aspects of my time on the staff then, was the controversies related to that. But most of the time, though, I really felt great about some of the things that took place during that time. For example, there are 2 pastors who are still serving now that I worked out their call process, Pastor Dahlhoff in Butler and Pastor Keplinger in Zelienople. So they are still there serving their congregations after all these years, and I was there to arrange it. I was on the hiring committee for Randy Gullickson at Lutheran, our wonderful camp. And at Bethesda Home, Gene Wasinski, the director, has been up there for a number of years. I was on his hiring committee as a member of the staff at that time because I carried the portfolio of social ministry organizations at that time. At the same time we had the controversy, we also had some very good accomplishments during that time period.
Indeed, sometimes when people remember those years in the 1980s, that was a big news story.
Yes.
It was a very difficult time. There was a lot of tension. The DMS, of course, stands for Denominational Ministry Strategy,
Yes.
an attempt on the part of some who saw themselves as a prophetic ministry,
Right.
but yet there was a lot of hurt, a lot of pain during that time. But yet, as you say, a lot of good things too.
Right.
We came through it, and I'd like to think that on the other end of it, we are a stronger church, a stronger synod for it.
I think in a way we are, because we still have a couple of the pastors in the synod are persons who participated with the DMS then. And they're still here. We have a good relationship with them.
Yes.
And it was a time of difficulty and struggle within parishes, but that's the history. I mean, this is the church. You know, the church is not made for perfect people. It's made for people who are sinners to get together and try to deal with that problem, and to know that we have a Savior that will make it possible for us to deal with that problem.
Yes. When were the good old days when there weren't any problems in the church, right? Even St. Paul addresses
Right.
conflicts within some of those early congregations, Corinthians and others. There's always been, but we will persevere. We shall overcome.
Tony, I'm going to tell you this strange incident. This happened when I was a teenager in my home congregation in Swissvale. Our Sunday school did the amazing thing of electing a woman to be the superintendent of the Sunday school. And this was back, when, it was, women's place was in the home. It wasn't in the church. Well, of course, the church, women have always been very much important in the role of the church, but during this meeting, one of the older gentlemen in the congregation, and he was probably in his 80s when I was a teenager, so this was a person who was a long time ago, was very upset when this person stood up in front, and he came up and walked up and read the part in Paul's scripture about women should not be doing this and doing that in the church, and he sat down, and the poor woman, she didn't know what to do. But he didn't win. The women are really a wonderful part of the church and carry on much of the work of the church. And of course, since your wife's also a pastor, you know how important female pastors are to the church now, even though we didn't have them up until about 40 years ago. But this is something that I remember from the past that is now was a controversy then, but it was just a controversy that really didn't have any meat to it. It just was an unfortunate carryover of this gentleman's very bad prejudices. I know that he's probably now in the church triumphant, same as the rest of us. We're sinners. And probably now maybe even has a female pastor that sits with him at the table up at the wonderful place of the banquet in heaven. So
that's a nice image, a nice picture to have.
Yeah, right.
So, all of us together there around the table, regardless of who we are.
Who we are and our background. Yes.
That's right. So you've seen a lot of changes in the time that you've served, not only in the parish, but even since that time now, in the time that you served as assistant to the bishop in the 1980s, and now serving as an assistant to the bishop in an interim role. Can you say some things about the changes in that amount of time?
One of the things I've said to a couple of people since I began this in 1st of January is I wanted to quote that great theologian Yogi Berra. He says, "Deja vu all over again." It's as if there are some things that are very different, but it's only the people. The things that go on are very similar. We still have controversies. We still have call committees that need to be guided in how to treat a pastor candidate so that they get a fair hearing and they understand things and so forth. And the same thing's going to apply now. So there's some things that are not going to change. They're very similar. People are basically the same, even though their names are different and they're different situations. And several of the people that I worked with on call processes in the past are not any longer with us. But it's interesting too, occasionally I was to a meeting not too long ago where one of the members of the committee was somebody that I had been in contact with back in those early days. So someone still on a committee to call a pastor now that was on a call committee back in the 1980s.
More about that. Thanks
Sure.
so much for what you shared so far. We're going to take a short break here on Lutherans Alive, and we'll be back with more with Pastor Larry Camberg after this. Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We continue our conversation with Pastor Larry Camberg, who at this time currently serves as the interim assistant to the bishop. Interim, of course, is a temporary role,
Right.
but a very important one. What sort of falls under your responsibility now? There may be some who are unfamiliar with what an assistant to the bishop does, whether that person is an interim or a permanently called person.
First of
Yes.
all, the term interim just means the short term between. We are in the process of calling a new person to be in that. The bishop's working on that with people who are being considered. So an assistant of the bishop basically does that. They assist the bishop. The bishop, of course, is called by the people that vote for the person at the assembly to be the leader of the program of the synod, to oversee the process, to be pastor to the pastors, to oversee the call process when we help congregations receive a pastor. So that's basically what the assistants do. We work on behalf of the bishop. Pastor Sarah Lee Faulkner is the other assistant, and as I said, I replaced temporarily now Pastor Sandra Kessinger, who was the other assistant. At one time we had 3 assistants. Back when I was back in 82, 87, we had 4 assistants, plus the secretary was full-time, but we also went from Erie to Beckley, West Virginia in the size of our territory. Now our synod is just the Southwestern Pennsylvania territory. The principal thing that I'm doing now, usually the assistant to the bishop carries a portfolio that includes a portion of the congregations. That is, we have 6 conferences. Because there are 2 of us, we each have 3 conferences. I'm currently responsible for conferences 1, 3, and 4, and Pastor Sarah is responsible for 2, 5, and 6. And which means that she basically goes down the South Hills and the Mon Valley and the Butler area, and I do basically out the Ohio Valley for Beaver, and I'm up towards Armstrong and Westmoreland counties for most of the territory that we cover. So that's what we do there. And what we do is we assist the bishop. Usually what happens when a congregation becomes vacant, the bishop goes out and meets with the congregation with the assistant present. The bishop explains the process of how they go about making sure they are preparing for a new pastor to be called, and to help them understand. Then turns everything over to the assistant, who then helps them do the profile for the congregation and helps them plan things out and spends the detailed time with them while the bishop has set the overall theme and the whole process. So that's kind of the way we work as a team. And we actually do work as a team. Bishop Cussero is very team-oriented. He really wants to make sure that all of us are working together on the same plan, same thing. We talk about most of the vacancies together, even the vacancies that aren't in your territory. We still have input. When we get a lot of requests from other areas of the country. There's a new process that the ELCA has adopted recently that almost opens to anyone in the country to maybe be a participant here. And if they indicate that they are interested in our synod, we'll automatically get a resume, at least a general one, of these people, and then we have to vet them and look over to see whether we might consider them to be here. And so we spend a lot of time doing that too, because we want to give fairness to anyone who wants to come into our synod. We're glad that anybody is thinking about the possibility of coming here, because we have very good pastors in our synod territory, but sometimes a congregation maybe needs something. We don't have a person with that talent, so we can call somebody from outside in.
Our understanding of leadership in the church is that the bishop and the office of the bishop carries with it the responsibility of oversight. And that's precisely what you just described, in that there is a process, there are certain procedures by which pastors are placed in congregations, are called to congregations. And there may be many folks who aren't aware that it's not just sort of a willy-nilly process like, hey, you want to be our pastor, come and come and talk to us, or some pastor walks up to a congregation and says, hey, do you need a pastor? No, it's all overseen by the bishop and the bishop's staff.
One of the things about this, though, is the Lutheran bishop's a little bit different than some others. The Roman Catholic bishop, for example, is much more authoritative over, and they actually assign people. Actually, what our bishop does, they don't assign somebody. We will maybe have 3 candidates offered to a congregation, and then they make the decision of who they want. So we don't have that kind of a placement authority, except in an instance such as an interim. We don't have a call process for interims. Usually the bishop does the assignment of that. We have a very open process where congregations can make a lot of the choice themselves of who they want.
But it's the bishop's office that in the role of oversight facilitates that process and makes sure that those interviews and that those contacts are done in a way that's appropriate and smooth.
Right. And a congregation basically that's on our roster of congregations is expected to use the bishop's office in that way. In other words, even if they have a person they would like to consider, they still go through the bishop's office in order to get that candidate. Very seldom does the bishop say they can't consider that person, but they want to know who the candidates might be. If they have somebody, maybe somebody in their congregation knows somebody in another synod that says there's a good pastor, why don't we consider that person? If that would happen, our bishop would probably call their bishop, see if the person would be available, and maybe then if it worked out, they could be considered as a candidate. Sure. But it would take some time, and the process would be very interesting to do that.
And in all of this, of course, we pray and trust that
absolutely.
The Holy Spirit is at work in all of these things.
That's the way the Spirit does work.
Yes.
Sometimes the Spirit works directly, other times works through other people. And that's what we visualize, and that's why we do a very conscientious job of these vettings. I mean, there's not one of those candidates that we get that we don't really look seriously at what they say and what their potential might be for service here. Because I think it's important for us to say, is this person maybe the kind of person we need to come here to serve one of our congregations? And we always have probably at least 7 or 8 congregations in the call process at any one time out of the number of congregations we have. And then we have, of course, some that are kind of up in the air about whether they're able to full-time call a pastor or not. So we often have different kind of settings for them. And we also always adjusting. For example, we just had a merger vote 2 weeks ago of 3 congregations to merge together. And hopefully they'll make a stronger congregation. But that was their choice. It wasn't us telling them they had to become a joint congregation, but they chose among themselves to do that. And it required them each to vote with a 2/3 vote in favor. And of course, I think there were only maybe 2 or 3 votes negative in each of the congregations. So it came out very well, and it worked out very well.
Larry, thanks again for what you've shared so far. It's helpful sometimes for folks to be aware and more knowledgeable about how these things work and where the decisions are made, how the decisions are made. It's good that we talk about these things more with Pastor Larry Camberg on Lutherans Alive after we take another short break. thanks so much for being with us on Lutherans Alive. We're also very thankful for Pastor Larry Camberg, who is currently serving as our interim assistant to the bishop here on our territory, the Southwestern Pennsylvania Synod, and us Lutherans. And as you have been a part of our Lutheran family here in Southwestern Pennsylvania for a long time, Larry, again, we've talked about some of the changes that you've seen, and how many different people that you've worked with and seen over the years.
Amazing number of people. I probably have as broad of a background as just about anybody in this synod, because I've served as an assistant in a fairly large congregation, a solo pastor in a very small congregation, served for 4 years in one of the largest congregations in the synod, served in an urban setting at Mount Zion in Pittsburgh, and been in a suburban area in Lower Borough, and I've had a wide variety of opportunities to serve in different kinds of ways. And I also, when I was at Adrian, served as for 15 years as a what we call a tent-making ministry. I was the director of community action in Armstrong County while I was serving as the pastor at St. Mark's in Adrian. And it was an interesting experience to do that too. And that's probably why Bishop May chose me in the first place to be involved with this process of the synod, because I had that experience of working with the poor and with programs like Head Start and the nutrition program and things like that in my other experience. So I've had all kinds of experiences in my ministry. One of the unfortunate things is I also, in 2 of my interims, helped close 2 congregations, but not because I was at fault for closing them, but because they had decided to close. One was Mount Zion in Pittsburgh on Perrysville Avenue that merged into Brighton Heights Church, and the other was Holy Trinity in Greensburg, which was the old Swedish Augustana church in town that really, they decided that they had basically 20 people left for worship, and that their better use of their resources, they had a considerable amount of financial resources, would be in sharing with others. So they decided to close down, and they turned their assets over, and some of the legacy fund that's in the synod came from that congregation. They also provided some funds for other congregations in the town and everything like that too. So even in a negative thing such as a closure of a congregation, they did some positive things for the community. So those are the types of things that I remember well in these things. I'm a little bit sad about the fact that 2 of these congregations that I had served have decided to leave the ELCA. It gets a little bit discouraging when that happens, because you wonder, what impact your ministry did have. But again, that's a decision that congregations make on their own. Pastors don't force decisions on congregations. They make decisions themselves. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from in my history. I enjoyed myself very much throughout my ministry. Some things have been hard and some things have been very good. I've had several nice weddings and had some really tough funerals. And I had one interesting incident at Adrian that I baptized on my last week there, a baby of one of the girls in the congregation that I had baptized as a baby. So that was 2 generations in that one congregation that I was. And that was really great, because you wonder, boy, that's great to carry on that kind of a tradition.
It's wonderful to see those passages and,
yes.
and to be a part of that. And the people, as pastors, they invite us into their lives at very crucial moments like that, and it's an honor.
Yeah.
Really
well,
is.
and really, it's the key to a successful ministry. I would advise any pastor that your role is, yes, to preach and to lead the sacraments and to do all kinds of ecclesiastical stuff. But your most important role is to be in relationship with your people and to be there when the important things happen in their life. Their weddings, their funerals, their baptisms, their confirmations, when somebody's been given a diagnosis of a terrible illness. when somebody's had something wonderful happen. You know, they win a prize or they have something great happen, and you're there as the pastor. And I think they appreciate that so much more than even some of the greatest sermons that you've ever preached.
In the last little bit of time that we have together today, Larry, you wanted to say a few words about some colleagues that have been important to you along the way.
This past year has been a little tough for me personally because my good friend and colleague Howard Ravenstall passed away, and had a very bad last few months of his life, and I really miss him so much. And we did all kinds of things together. We were at seminary together and so forth. And I was deeply appreciative of him, and that's why I decided at the Synod Assembly that I would carry his banner of tithing to the message of the Synod, and I would carry on that responsibility that he had given, that if anybody was upset that when they tithed, that they were unhappy with it, that I would reimburse them for whatever it is, and I still hold by that with that. A couple other wonderful pastors that John Schneidmiller, who had been our director for mission back in the old LCA, he was very important and had served well, and he passed away this year. And Pat Mayer, who had been a wonderful pastor in the church and in the whole territory, had been on the Synod Council, was the executive board back in those days, and he was involved in Lutheran and all kinds of very important activities. He also passed away this year. And unfortunately, there are others that have done it. So we're at the point where I really want to express my appreciation for those folks and my relationship with them, because they've had an important impact on my life.
We're thankful for them and for all the saints triumphant, and for those of us who are still on our pilgrimage and who continue to serve. Those like yourself, thank you for what you're doing for the Synod right now and in your new role, and continued blessings.
And I ask that you make good prayers that the person that replaces me is going to be really great to help Bishop Cusserow make this Synod stronger.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good.
Thank you, Larry.
Sure.
And thank you for being with us today on Lutherans Alive. We know that from wherever you're watching, we know that there's a Lutheran congregation out there that in your neighborhood or near your neighborhood would be very pleased to welcome you. Won't you come and worship with us, and won't you come and see us next time on Lutherans Alive?